Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most talked about stories in recent naval and defense discussions, and that's the confrontation between Venezuelan naval forces and a U.S. Navy ship. This isn't just about a single event at sea, it's about what these kinds of encounters tell us about performance, capabilities, and the economics behind military hardware. I'll be walking you through what happened, what it means, how these ships perform in real conditions, and even a breakdown of the costs involved when you compare the vessels and their operational budgets. By the end, you'll have a full understanding of why this incident matters, both militarily and financially. When two ships meet on open water, especially ships from countries that don't have the friendliest relations, there's always tension. The Venezuelan Navy, while not one of the strongest in the world, still operates a fleet that includes older frigates and patrol vessels. These ships, many of which were built decades ago, are designed more for coastal defense and sovereignty patrols rather than projecting power across the globe. The U.S. Navy destroyer that was challenged, on the other hand, represents one of the most advanced classes of warships ever built, with cutting-edge technology, radar, missile systems, and the ability to operate in any ocean under almost any conditions. Performance-wise, the U.S. Navy ship that was involved, likely an Burke-class destroyer, can reach speeds of over 30 knots, carry more than 90 missiles in its vertical launch system, and defend itself against submarines, aircraft, and incoming missiles simultaneously. Its Aegis combat system integrates radar and weapons in real time, giving it the ability to track hundreds of targets at once and respond in seconds. Compare this to the Venezuelan ship, which is slower, less equipped with modern electronic warfare, and operates with older radar and weapons technology. While it may have surface-to-air missiles and anti-ship weapons, they are based on designs that are often decades behind current U.S. systems. The incident highlights a fundamental imbalance in naval performance. When Venezuela attempted to challenge the U.S. ship, it was a demonstration more of political will than military capability. The smaller Venezuelan ship could shadow or harass, but it could not realistically pose a serious threat to a vessel with layered defenses like the American destroyer. In terms of endurance, the U.S. Navy ship can remain at sea for extended deployments, supported by replenishment ships, while Venezuelan vessels are limited to shorter patrols near their coastline. This matters because in any confrontation or extended standoff, the side that can stay operational longer has the upper hand. Now let's talk about cost, because that's where things get even more interesting. A modern Burke-class destroyer costs about $1.80 to $2 billion to build, with annual operating costs running into the hundreds of millions once you factor in crew, maintenance, fuel, and weapons readiness. These ships are expensive, but they are also multi-mission platforms that can handle almost any scenario: anti-air warfare, anti-submarine operations, ballistic missile defense, and long-range strike missions. Venezuela, by comparison, operates older ships that were purchased at a fraction of that price, often in the hundreds of millions or less. Their operational budgets are far lower, but so is their capability. This creates a situation where a smaller navy might try to show strength by confronting a much more expensive platform, but the actual military balance is not even close. For the United States, a ship like this is one of dozens in service, meaning the Navy has redundancy, depth, and overwhelming superiority in numbers and quality. For Venezuela, each ship is critical, and the loss of even one vessel would represent a major blow to its fleet. That's why these encounters are so high stakes for smaller navies. They're putting assets at risk that they can't easily replace. For the U.S., it's a show of presence and deterrence, making sure that international waters remain open and challenges are met with overwhelming superiority. Looking at performance in real-world encounters, U.S. Navy destroyers routinely operate alongside carrier strike groups, supported by submarines and aircraft, making them even more formidable. Venezuela's ships, by contrast, often operate independently or in small groups close to shore. Their weapons systems, while potentially dangerous, lack the modern integration and automation of U.S. ships. For example, the U.S. destroyer can launch Tomahawk cruise missiles thousands of miles with precision, while Venezuelan vessels are generally equipped with short to medium-range anti-ship missiles designed for regional defense. This gap in offensive capability is enormous. From a financial perspective, you also have to consider training and logistics. The The U.S. Navy spends billions every year not just on the ships themselves, but on maintaining supply chains, spare parts, training simulators, and global infrastructure. Venezuelan naval forces operate on a much smaller budget, with limited access to advanced spare parts, often relying on older systems and occasional foreign support. That shows up in readiness. The percentage of ships that are fully operational at any given time is much higher for the U.S. than for Venezuela. When reviewing an encounter like this, the performance gap is clear, but the political statement is often more important. Venezuela's decision to challenge a U.S. ship isn't about winning in combat, it's about sending a message domestically and internationally. For internal audiences, it shows defiance, a refusal to be intimidated. For international audiences, it tries to demonstrate that Venezuela still has a navy that will stand up for sovereignty. From the U.S. side, the message is equally strong. No matter where you are, if you attempt to push back against freedom of navigation, the U.S. Navy will respond with overwhelming presence and capability. The economics of this are fascinating, because while a U.S. destroyer is far more expensive to build and operate, the cost of deterring smaller navies is relatively low in the bigger picture of the U.S. defense budget. The entire U.S. defense budget is over $800 billion annually, so even a $1 billion ship is just one piece of a much larger global strategy. For Venezuela, whose entire defense spending is a fraction of that, even operating a single warship for patrol represents a significant portion of their budget. This difference in scale explains why the confrontation is so asymmetric. If we break it down into performance numbers, the U.S. ship can detect targets hundreds of miles away, engage multiple threats at once, launch long-range precision strikes, and defend itself against nearly any modern attack. Its endurance at sea can last for months with proper resupply. Venezuelan ships, by contrast, have shorter radar ranges, older missile systems, limited endurance, and reduced survivability if targeted by modern precision weapons. That means in any real conflict scenario, the Venezuelan Navy would be quickly overwhelmed. And yet, this is why such encounters make headlines. It's the classic David and Goliath story, a smaller navy standing up to the most powerful navy in the world. While the outcome of a real fight is not in doubt, the symbolism is what matters. For viewers trying to understand what really happened, the key takeaway is this: Venezuela challenged, but the United States responded with quiet confidence backed by overwhelming capability. On the pricing side, if we compare, the U.S. destroyer's missile, like a single Tomahawk, costs about $1.5 million per shot. Venezuelan ships might carry missiles that cost a fraction of that, but they also have far fewer of them and lack a long-range strike option. The operating cost per day of a U.S. destroyer can run between $600,000 and $1 million, depending on deployment. For Venezuelan ships, the cost is lower, but when measured against their economy, it's much higher as a share of national resources. That's what makes this kind of review important. You see not just the military side, but the financial reality. A country like Venezuela has to weigh every deployment carefully, because fuel, maintenance, and crew all cost money that could be spent elsewhere. The U.S., with its massive budget, can afford to keep dozens of ships deployed at once around the globe. At the end of the day, the confrontation is more symbolic than practical. The Venezuelan ship could not realistically damage the U.S. destroyer without risking immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The U.S. Navy, on the other hand, uses such encounters to reinforce its doctrine of presence and deterrence. From a performance standpoint, there's no real comparison. The U.S. ship outclasses its Venezuelan counterpart in every metric: speed, firepower, defense systems, radar, endurance, and versatility. From a price perspective, the U.S. invests billions into ships like these because they are the backbone of global maritime strategy, while Venezuela operates older, cheaper ships with limited capability because that's all its budget allows. So when you see a video about Venezuela challenging a U.S. Navy ship, remember that behind the dramatic images is a much deeper story about technology, performance, economics, and symbolism. The ships themselves tell a tale of two very different navies, one operating on a global scale with almost unlimited resources, the other trying to project strength with limited tools. And that's why these encounters continue to capture attention. They are moments where politics, performance, and price all collide on the open sea. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more detailed reviews of military hardware, performance comparisons, and cost analyses, make sure to stay tuned. There's always more to explore when it comes to understanding how nations project power and what it really costs to build and operate the machines that dominate the oceans.